This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Wednesday, August 5th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. An Eritrean refugee was taken by human traffickers and held captive for nearly 2 years in Libya. She survived horrific violence and sexual abuse. With help from the United Nations Refugee Agency, she was evacuated to Rwanda, where she's receiving psychosocial care to help her heal from the trauma. Lauren Anthony has our report.
Samrawit had hoped to leave Eritrea. One of her close relatives had fled military conscription there, and she was afraid of conscription herself. She was afraid for her life, but instead, in her search for refuge, she was abducted by human traffickers and faced a 2-year ordeal with torture and sexual abuse. She was just 18 when it happened. The kidnappers took her to a town in Sudan near the border with Libya. Her real identity is being hidden, and she told her story to the UN's Refugee Agency.
When I remember that moment, I feel terrible. First, they took us by force on our way to the markets. They told us we are going to Libya. Second, they raped us and threatened us with knives and guns.
Samrawit is now safe in Rwanda, but getting there was a tough ordeal. She was held for 2 months in a traffickers' camp in southeast Libya, where her captors initially demanded $6,000 for her freedom. She was bought and sold by different groups of traffickers and smugglers. Her family eventually paid over $12,000 for ransom and a spot on a boat to Europe. But it didn't get better. Last July, the smugglers finally took 350 of them to the Mediterranean coast to attempt the crossing to Europe. The boats later began to sink. Samrawit managed to swim for 8.5 hours until she was found by the Libyan Coast Guard. She was taken to a detention centre and, with help from the UN, was then evacuated to Rwanda last October, alongside other refugees who had been in Libya. More than 250 people rescued from Libya now live in the Gashora Transit Centre on the outskirts of the capital, Kigali. Most come from Eritrea, Somalia and Sudan and have been given asylum seeker status. The UN agency and other partners are calling on countries to protect refugees and migrants travelling on routes controlled by human traffickers and to hold those responsible to account.
That was Lauren Anthony of Reuters reporting. Kenya's Amina Mohamed is one of the early front runners to become director of the World Trade Organization, a global body that has never been led by a female or an African. Angela Okumadu reports.
The World Trade Organization has never been led by a woman or an African. But Amina Mohamed is hoping to change all that. She's Kenya's candidate to replace Brazil's Roberto Azevedo as Director General of the body that deals with the rules governing trade between nations. And she's emerged as one of the early frontrunners, although weeks of campaigning lie ahead. The reform-minded minister told Reuters that a closed-door vetting session last week went really well as she outlined her platform to steer the organization out of crisis from global trade tensions and rising protectionism to a lockdown-induced dive in business.
I think the rule book needs to be upgraded, and if it's not upgraded, issues will continue to occur. The negotiating function of WTO has faltered. We need to revive that so that members are actually sitting in rooms discussing and negotiating.
For Mohamed, a former WTO chair, a top priority is the resumption of the appellate body. The United States has paralyzed the WTO's main appeals court by blocking the appointment of judges after complaining that it has overreached its mandate. Mohamed, who is seeking Washington's support, expressed some sympathy with the criticism.
I think those the concerns that have been raised, they would not have been raised if they did not have solid reason to raise them.
But Mohamed is not the only African woman delegates say is a favorite for the top job.
We need an institution that can promote a rules-based system.
And she will need to win over those nations from the continent who have expressed support for Nigerian economist Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. The WTO will eliminate candidates in batches, starting with those least likely to win consensus from the WTO's 164 members.
That was Angela Okumadu of Reuters reporting. Africa on Wednesday is nearing 1 million COVID-19 infections and almost 21,000 deaths, according to Reuters. Here's a roundup of some African nations' coronavirus restrictions. South Africa leads the continent with more than 521,000 infections and 8,800 deaths, according to Johns Hopkins University. President Cyril Ramaphosa in July reimposed a curfew and a ban on alcohol sales, both of which are still in effect, and he announced that public schools would be shuttered until August 24th. In Nigeria, a ban on interstate travel has been lifted and domestic flights resumed. A date has yet to be announced for the resumption of international flights. The wearing of masks in public is mandatory. In Rwanda, it is mandatory to wear masks, and those who fail to do so face arrest. Schools, universities, bars are closed nationwide. Tanzania confirmed its first COVID-19 case in March, but has not publicly updated its coronavirus numbers since May. In Ethiopia, passengers arriving on international flights are quarantined unless they produce a negative COVID-19 test certificate no more than 5 days old. Schools are closed nationwide, and it is mandatory to wear masks in public. And Zimbabwe has an ongoing dusk to dawn curfew and increased joint military and police checkpoints. As the COVID-19 pandemic grips the United States, even remote areas are suffering from the outbreak. VOA's Arturo Martinez reports from Navajo Nation in Utah that tourists traveling to nearby national parks appear to have helped spread the disease there, and residents are trying to help bring relief.
The main purpose of our relief program is to deliver goods and home supplies, home food. So we try our best to help those that are either quarantined or self-isolating themselves. The virus has devastated the Navajo Nation due to factors like lack of health infrastructure, lack of health resources, lack of running water to people's homes, and lack of electricity. The Utah portion of the Navajo Nation is a hot spot, and we are doing our best here to help people during these trying times. We drive a lot of miles, that's for sure. Some people live way out in the middle of nowhere, miles from any store, miles from the nearest town. This is like off the grid. We meet a lot of beautiful people, and we see a lot of nice, beautiful places as well. We are unloading some donations that came from the Rotary Club here in northern Utah, and they got 5 vehicles full of stuff. So a lot of the people that are helping combat this virus are corporations, private donors, volunteers we have. I mean, we service all these communities because so many people want to help out. The great team that I have with my project program coordinator, Sahar, my good friend Sahar, she really helped me out.
We don't always have produce, we do today. Every person that comes through our line is either a familiar face or a potential family member. Make deliveries for elders 65 and over, families in need, and those who have tested positive here within the Utah Navajo community. Imagine a state the size of West Virginia with only 11 grocery stores.
This is a woman that she hasn't had food for several days and she doesn't have transportation.
So happy to find you.
Oh yeah. Huh? I'm here by myself.
Oh, that's you?
Yeah.
You know, you see somebody in trouble and you go. You don't think about it, you just react. And that's what happened, that's how it started for me. And it's affected me deeply because you see people hurting, you see people hungry or people asking for help. And You see people who are sick with the virus, and it affects you, it moves you. You think you know who you are, but life will smack you inside the head out of nowhere and be like, no, you don't.
After the United States, Brazil has the world's highest number of COVID-19 deaths and confirmed cases, turning the South American nation into a coronavirus hotspot. Despite this grim situation, Brazil's biggest cities, Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, are reopening businesses, even as epidemiologists warn that the rising death toll from the pandemic could grow exponentially. Edgar Maciel reports from Sao Paulo.
Roberto Molina, an engineer, has been in quarantine since March. That's when his company suspended office activities because of the coronavirus. Since then, he hasn't left home for fear of the virus.
I'm afraid for my family. My concern is to be a vector and end up transmitting it to other people.
But Brazil's biggest cities, São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, have reopened commercial activities, parks, and gyms, even though the country has registered an average of more than 1,000 deaths a day. Last weekend was the first time that Molina went outside. His choice, a restaurant.
It's like I'm doing something for the first time in my life, something brand new. I felt totally safe.
But less than 2 kilometers away, another reality. In a popular street market, overcrowding. To buy cheaper food, people put themselves at risk of infection. In just 20 minutes, Celita da Costa had contact with 3 vendors not wearing masks.
This is a lack of education and love for the others, because if I don't take care of myself, I'll spread disease, and so pandemic will never end.
Regional capitals like Porto Alegre and Curitiba were considered examples in coronavirus control at the beginning of the pandemic. The low number of deaths and cases led to a reopening in June, but it maybe have been too soon. Now hospitals in both cities have reached a limit of capacity.
Some states reopen economic activities, and now the whole process had to go back a few steps because we remain in an accelerated phase of coronavirus. As much as we have reopened, we always need to look at our weekly data and build a slowly recovery, understanding the necessity of the economic retake.
Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, even after being diagnosed with COVID-19, continues to say the disease is just a little flu, for which nothing can be done.
What do you want me to do? My name is Messiah, but I can't work miracles.
Meanwhile, a coalition of Brazilian health workers has lodged a complaint against Bolsonaro at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, accusing him of genocide and crimes against humanity for his response to the pandemic. Edgar Maciel for VOA News, São Paulo.
Students in Indian-controlled Kashmir have had a difficult year. Authorities closed schools in August 2019 after political disturbances in the once semi-autonomous region. Schools opened in February but promptly closed again because of the coronavirus pandemic. As VOA's Arasha Basadi reports, students may have found a solution to their education problem right under the sun.
Math students file into their new classroom through this field in Srinagar, Kashmir. Their teacher, Munir Alam, calls education a matter of public health.
The students of this part of the world, Kashmir, they are suffering from mental trauma. They are traumatized. Literally, they are patients. They are the patients of depression.
Last year, authorities closed schools due to heightened political tensions after India revoked the region's semi-autonomous status. Classrooms were reopened in February only to be closed again because of coronavirus. Alam says students have had only 15 days of school since 2019, and it's time to change that.
The driving force of this is to get them out of that depression. They have a habit of leaving their home every day for classes, for teachers, for schools. We have snatched that directly or indirectly by COVID.
Internet restrictions here limit distance learning because of extremely slow network speeds. Students say that's no way to learn.
We used to have online classes, and due to restricted internet, we could not understand well in it. There was buffering, sort of in these online classes, and understanding during that the slow internet was the most difficult task.
It gave us a ray of hope that we can do better in our future, and it will definitely benefit us.
Security lockdowns and information blackouts are not uncommon in Kashmir. But combined with the coronavirus, it all adds up to more than 1 million students from almost 14,000 schools that haven't had class in almost a year. Munir students say his open-air classroom provides the education that gives them hope for their future. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Washington.
We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Lina Khmoudou, your VOA Health correspondent. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the World Health Organization says the best way to reduce your chances of being infected or spreading coronavirus is to wear a mask to avoid breathing any small liquid droplets which may contain the virus. Regularly wash your hands with soap and water or clean your hands with an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. For more information on COVID-19, visit who.int or contact your local or national health authorities.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Recent protests on the streets of Portland, Oregon featured confrontations between demonstrators and federal agents deployed to the city by the Trump administration. Deborah Bloom reports the departure of federal forces has de-escalated tensions and allowed protesters to refocus their message on demanding racial justice in America.
When Black lives are under attack, what do you do?
With federal agents out of sight, demonstrators on the streets of Portland say they want to steer the conversation back to a rallying cry heard across America. Black Lives Matter.
I love that I can see and look at all the faces fighting for my life, fighting for Black lives.
An activist who goes only by the name of Payday came to Portland from Seattle, Washington, to march with protesters and keep them focused on a core message of racial justice.
Let's let our numbers and our heart and our passion and our love that we have for one another to walk up and down these streets every single day, let's let that suppress and oppress those who have oppressed us.
He's one of several black activists in a city that is more than 3/4 white and has seen some of the most prolonged and sustained protests decrying racism and police violence against people of color.
When you are out here, you guys need to constantly be asking yourself this question. What am I doing to better a black person's life?
A group of teenagers calling themselves the Portland Black Youth Movement has taken the spotlight in recent days.
It is not safe for black people. And a lot of you don't realize that. You don't understand what we go through, especially living in the largest city in America.
Demonstrations in Portland have been sustained for more than 2 months since African-American George Floyd died in police custody in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Some believe the protests have veered off track.
It started out as a George Floyd vigil, then it became a bunch of white people breaking and entering into buildings.
Federal agents were deployed to the city in early July, a move civil rights groups denounced as an overreach of federal authority. The Trump administration said government property had to be protected from rioters, while President Donald Trump pledged to bring, quote, law and order to America's cities. But the presence of federal forces only heightened passions and intensified the unrest, culminating in nightly clashes between protesters and officers. In late July, Oregon's governor announced a deal with the Trump administration to withdraw federal officers. The Multnomah County Sheriff says he's grateful for the calmer demonstrations.
We very much appreciate that from the protesters. We're looking forward to another night of peaceful protesting.
Now, community activists hope to redirect the conversation away from federal actions and back to George Floyd.
The U.S. has dropped this subject. This subject isn't it anymore.
It's not trending anymore.
Black Lives isn't trending anymore. But Portland, we didn't give up. We're still here.
So long as there are demonstrations, these teenagers say they'll be on the streets to take the mic and amplify calls for change. For VOA News, I'm Deborah Bloom in Portland, Oregon.
The internet has opened new frontiers of music for people looking for something other than popular top 40 radio fare. In France, for instance, the music scene is soaking up some new sounds from the African continent. Elhame Lecour has our report.
Majnun is a singer-songwriter from Senegal who lives in Orléans, France. His sound is an eclectic mix of hip-hop, jazz and reggae.
There is a very, very rich scene of what is called African music. When you go to the continent, you realize it. Music from South Africa and that from Senegal is full of different influences. There is electro, there is modern music. Do Africans have the right to seize more modern music? Or should they always take out the kora, put themselves under the baobab tree, and give people the postcard we want to see from them?
Majnun means the madman in Arabic, a name the artist says he chose because it gave him more freedom to express himself. His lyrics convey his life experiences.
It is about restoring a little light to the African continent and its people, black people in general, to give them back the shine of their own light. So, it's about self-determination, effectively economic, political, cultural, spiritual.
Majnun's rising popularity among Western audiences isn't unique. Producer Moussa Wagué has spent the last 6 years working with African musicians and is now has about 20 offices in Francophone Africa.
I have the impression that it's becoming the new pop. Even if we don't understand the words, the rhythm takes us, and we love African music. And that's why it's taking the world right now.
Wagué's recording company is putting together a traveling festival dedicated to these African sounds. The tour will start in 20 African countries before heading over to Europe and the United States. Ilham Lecoeur for VOA Africa, Orléans, France.
In our tech report, the gaming industry as a form of entertainment in most of Africa is still in its infancy. Still, an increasing number of young Africans are honing their gaming skills, intending to build professional careers in the fast-growing industry. In Rwanda, Guez Show Studios, a creator of VR computer-generated content, is proving that this kind of content has the potential to change the gaming industry. Africa 54 technology correspondent Paul Ndiho spoke to Mufud Nkurunziza, CEO and founder, Guez Show Animation Studios in Kigali, Rwanda.
Mufita Nkurunziza, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Paul.
You run an animation studios in Rwanda. Bring me up to speed. How have you been able to survive under these difficult times? What is it that you've done differently to keep your business and your staff safe during these times of COVID?
Thank you, Paul. So we've done quite different things in terms of staying alive, in terms of business, safety as people, me, my team, and our families. In terms of business, definitely, since the whole business value chain everywhere is affected, we got the hit, like any other business. But also, as much as we got hit, there has been also, opportunities where digital services requested more.
What is Guez Show Animation Studios all about?
We started off as a generic design agency, doing graphic design and usual stuff people need, like in terms of design and communication services. And now, like at this point, we are into animation, but also gravitating towards more to immersive kind of content creation, which is VR, AR. We are a CGI company. We create like computer-generated imagery, but now at this point focusing more onto VR and 3D animation.
I have my VR here. How can I be able to tap into that kind of technology that you have?
What you have there, that's a Gear VR, by Samsung. That one uses a cell phone. When the content is done, it's put on the phone. For us at this point, we kind of focused on PC-powered VR, which to run that you need Oculus Rift. It's the devices that we are using, and we work into the game environments to develop the content that goes there.
How big is the gaming industry in Rwanda?
It's growing. It's not big. It's not big. But as we have seen trends in terms of adoption of many things, I would say it's also among growing sectors.
What kind of things have you developed this far?
We initially intend to develop experiential kind of content. What I mean by that experiential, it's where, let's say you want to have, I will give an example in tourism. You want to tour someplace you've never been into. So you can put on the VR and you're taken there, So what you see, you kind of experience being in a dense forest.
Your president, His Excellency Paul Kagame, has been accredited by a lot of people as a visionary when it comes to what he's trying to do in Rwanda in the area of ICT. To what extent has the infrastructure put in place helped you as an individual or you as a business really to take your business to the next level?
The way his actions has helped me as an individual business or country, it's enormous. It's really big in any way you can look at it. But I will begin maybe talking. He has put into place infrastructure, and most of all these infrastructures have came in as a result of relationships he has built. So whenever he does go outside for tech events, or there's always delegation of entrepreneurs, startups that always goes into his delegation. We went together for Viva Tech, which is a tech event that happens every year in France. So whenever he attends, as opposed to just attending with politicians, he actually goes with startups. So we get to showcase, what we do on a bigger international scene.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nkurunziza, for your time.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me.
That was Africa 54's Paul Ndiho speaking to Mufut Nkurunziza, CEO and founder, Guez Show Animation Studios in Kigali, Rwanda. That's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.